Okay, so this is Stephanie Clark, Chair of the Public Records Advisory Council. Today is June 17th. I'm calling a meeting to order of the Public Records Advisory Council. I might mute you if I've got too much background noise, and you're welcome to mute yourself when you're not talking as well. That might help other folks hear. So far I have Emily, I have Steve, I have Les. Do I have Scott Winkles? I think Scott was a maybe, so I'm not too surprised there. Do I have Rob on the phone? No, Rob. I saw Mark join us. Sharon said she would not be here. Sharon, are you on? No. I see Tony has joined us. Hello, Tony.
No.
And do I have Michael Crone on the line? Do not hear Michael. And I have Adam. Thank you, Adam. And I see Senator Thatcher has joined us. Hello, Senator. And Representative Power, hi there. And Representative Power said she was not able to make it today. So everyone is accounted for who I was expecting. And we'll see if Michael or Rob can maybe join us later. So up on the screen, if folks can see my screen, if you're not just calling in, I did just put up the agenda. It's pretty small for today, not too exhaustive. Can I get someone to motion, please, to approve the agenda?
Stephanie, I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible to add maybe a discussion after, since it's a shorter agenda, there's been stuff weighing on my mind just about current events, and I don't know if it's possible, but I don't know. I just wanted to ask.
Sure, we can add kind of an open discussion at the end. If there's anything you want to discuss, Tony, that's perfectly fine. I just didn't get any other agenda items sent to me before,
Nope,
so
you're right.
that's why it looks a little bit small today. But yeah, happy to have kind of an open forum at the end if you'd like. That's no problem.
It's just, yeah, for sure. Completely my fault. I honestly didn't think about it until this morning, so it wasn't any criticism about it. Okay, thank you.
No problem. So can someone please move for this agenda with adding an open discussion forum at the end today?
So moved.
Can I get
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Great. We will go forward with the agenda. So the first item that we have today, so just a heads up for everyone, we will not be discussing the recruitment during this meeting. Just as an update to you all, I did notify the candidates of their status, and I have sent along the 3 names to the governor. But that's all I'm going to say during this meeting. That's not what our topic is for today. If you have questions about the recruitment, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can also reach out to the governor's office. Either Dustin Bueller or Mary Moeller would be good people to reach out to at the governor's office if you have questions about where the recruitment is at for the advocate. But again, we won't be going into that too much today at all. We are going to be focusing on the modifications to our original proposed SB 1506 from the last session. Some modifications proposed by Todd. I know we had some good discussion in April, and Todd added more modifications thanks to Adam and his insight with some of the HR rules and maybe other aspects that I'm overlooking. And then Rob Bovat was nice enough to put it into this format for us. So I'd like to open that up as open discussion, and then as a council, we can decide if we are ready to vote on the version that we would like to propose for the next session. And I've kind of broken that down into 5 voting areas. But yeah, I guess I would just want to open up discussion to kind of each of those 5 one by one, maybe might be a good way to do it. So the first thing that we would really need to decide on would be the introductory language. Todd, do you want to give us any updates at all on any changes you might have made, or anything you want to update the council on regarding this, and based on our previous meeting?
Yeah. Hey, Stephanie, this is Mark Landauer. Forgive me for interrupting.
Sure.
Just a point of clarification. You know, at the document that you're calling here.
Oh, I can't really hear Mark.
Okay, forgive me. Hopefully you can hear me better.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you provide a little bit of sense of who's made the corrections here to the document that we're looking at? Is this a combination of Todd and Rob's work?
Yes.
Or is okay?
Mm-hmm.
And may I ask further? Whose changes are who? Do we tracked the changes here by either Rob or Todd?
Well,
yeah, Mark, I can speak to that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say the only.
Oh, sorry, Stephanie.
Oh.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I was just going to say, I believe, Mark, that all Rob did was change the format. I do not think that he suggested any substantive changes, but Todd, maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, looking at it, he did distinguish between the original changes that the PRAC came up with while Ginger was still present as the concept that was proposed last session. Those are bolded but not highlighted. And then the language that I suggested be added or removed is bolded. And then what I suggested be added is highlighted in green, and what I suggested be removed is highlighted in red and crossed out.
So there's two different documents that are useful to look at. One is the one that would put it in like what the statute would look like, or are they the same? The one with the red and the green, and the one with the comments.
They are the same. They are the same in terms of substance.
Okay.
Yeah, the way and the difference is in the Word document of the draft that I submitted. The majority of my additions have comments attached to them explaining why I added them, whereas again in the statute that Rob marked up, my stuff is in red and green, and the council's original changes are just bolded but not highlighted.
Yeah,
okay.
Like the word exempt is bolded, yeah, and that's, yeah. Go ahead.
And Todd, forgive me for asking Todd, but from your perspective, were there any substantive differences between what you and Rob came up with? What I'm driving at here, of course, is are you two in alignment with the language as proposed before us today?
Well, Rob and I didn't speak.
I know you can't
this,
speak. I know you can't speak.
No. No, I know, and I'm not. I'm just saying we didn't talk before he did this, but in seeing what he did, he merely took my suggested language and put it into the statute to make it look as it would in a bill.
Yes.
But he didn't change anything I suggested, so it's still entirely open to debate.
So it was purely a legislative formatting exercise for Rob. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That helps a lot. I apologize to the committee for trying to get a little clarity.
No problem.
Hey, it's Emily. I appreciate that clarity, Mark. It's really helpful because, just to understand. And for me, it's been helpful to also realize what the council, changed even before. So I had a question that I didn't know if it should come up at the beginning or the end, but and I know I brought this up the last time we were looking at this, just sort of wondering out loud if this was back in April, I guess, if we should, since this bill in the form before Todd's changes did almost pass the short session this year. Last time we met, before the interviews, I brought up the question as to whether we should try to see if the leadership might be interested in bringing it up in the COVID special session. And People didn't think it was appropriate then because, that was really focused on a fiscal emergency, and that made sense to me. But I did want to raise the question again now because this session has changed and it's responding to other things, and I believe part of that will speak actually to records transparency. So I just wondered if we might want to think about that question again during this meeting, and if we do want to think about it, whether it'd be more appropriate to think about that now, or whether it'd be more appropriate to go through potential changes, because if we wanted to see if the leadership were interested in putting this together, perhaps with the other package of transparency bills in this focused session, maybe it would be better to stick with the language that pretty much everyone's already seen and has already agreed to. Maybe not. Anyway, so I wanted to raise that again, since the special session has changed significantly since the last time we responded to that concept.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
Okay. So, everyone, my opinion as to why I think the PRAC should consider moving forward with. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Todd. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. The reason I think the PRAC should consider moving forward with this more fulsome bill is the feedback that I received while advocating for the PRAC's bill, as well as the information I received from people like Brian DeForest, the Chief Operations Officer at DAS, and others, was that while the bill as created, if passed, would certainly make the office independent, it still included things and left out things that would have to be added into the law for the office to actually gain functional administrative independence, thus requiring the PRAC returning in another session with yet another bill, which you might want to classify as a cleanup bill. For instance, saying the office is independent in the statute wouldn't do anything for the budget. It would still remain at DAS unless or until a line item was created in the state budget specifically for the PRAC, which means the office, while on paper would be independent, would functionally still have its budget held by DAS. And that certainly has not been an issue up to this point. DAS has never attempted to interfere with the functions of the office anyway, including financially, but the work of actually and completely making the office independent would still have to go forward, as well as things like after Ginger's departure, or even while she was on maternity leave, there was no clear process for someone being appointed the acting advocate in her place. And frankly, after Ginger's departure, nobody really wanted to touch that could make that decision. And it took an incredibly long time and a hell of a lot of work to get to a point where I could be appointed the acting advocate, which just makes things complicated and implicates the ability of the office to remain independent. So in my opinion, I'm offering to the PRAC, couching this bill in terms of this is exactly what we asked for before, but it just makes it clearer and does it in one shot, I'm recommending is the best way to go.
This is Les. I'm wondering, Senator Thatcher was the sponsor of 1506. I'd be interested in letting her weigh in. If she senses any ability to move this bill next week, either in its original form or the modified form, or whether she thinks it's.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My thoughts are that this should be low-hanging fruit. However, this special session is being driven by the governor's office and the speaker's office, as far as I can figure out at this point. So nobody knows what's going on, really, but it seems like this should be a real easy low-hanging fruit. And plus, I had put it on the list of requests when they were talking about having a special session. It was all up in the air. They were wanting to get bills that were important to pass. This is one I had put on the list. It didn't make the cut, at least not on the one that's being, put forward at the moment, but I will keep pressing for that. Though we cannot introduce bills as legislators, we can amend a bill. So perhaps there will be a bill that an amendment would be appropriate in this case. So yeah, just throwing that out there.
this is why, so Senator, what would your counsel be that we just proceed with these changes and aim for the 2021 session, and then if lightning strikes and this comes up next week, that we deal with it then? What's your advice to us?
Well, I think that sounds about right. Aim for the 2021, but look for opportunities that might pop up sooner, whether it's this week, or I'm hearing there may be another special session near the middle or end of July having to do with budget issues. But yeah, there might be opportunities that we can look for. But planning for the 2021 session is smart at this point. That's what I would say. But look for those opportunities for sure.
Okay, thank you.
This is Steve. I do think there are strong arguments to be made now for why this could be part of a reform package. I mean, transparency is a big part of accountability, and accountability is a big part of the discussion right now with criminal justice. And I imagine there will probably be other legislation that people will be pushing in that regard in terms of access to records. And I think this could just be sort of part of that package. I think you certainly can make the argument that it's you know, it fortifies transparency and accountability. So I think we should be looking for opportunities in the special session. And for me, I think the changes that have been recommended make a lot of sense. I guess we can have further discussion about the importance of each of these changes. I do worry a bit, like if we have this opportunity, that probably the easiest, cleanest case to be made for passing it in a special session would be it passed both chambers unanimously. And so to the extent that we move from that and have to, make the case, these are just tweaks to what you are, or improvements to what you already passed, it may complicate things. But I would love to hear more. That's simply a strategic question. I'd love to hear more about that from Mark and from Senator Thatcher.
Okay, well, I'll jump in there.
Thank you.
I knew it happened.
I'm not going before you.
Well, I was just going to say that I agree wholeheartedly. Though a couple months ago, I would have argued that it would have been a little more difficult to sell it during a special session when they were trying to deal with COVID, very COVID heavy issues. But now I think the world has changed enough. It is definitely something, given the situation with accountability, that we make the case that this is a very easy bill to pass. It passed both, well, it got through one chamber. It was about to pass the other chamber. And it has everything to do with government accountability. So absolutely, we should not just look for the opportunities, but find opportunities. And that's why I was putting it on a list of, these are things that we really need to think about passing in a short session, or excuse me, a special session. So yeah, I think there's a good way of selling this as very appropriate given our climate right now.
I have a question. This is Tony.
Sure, go ahead,
Senator Thatcher, thank you very much for that feedback and advice. And when you earlier said that we have to look for the opportunity, I was kind of thinking that, that we should wait for the opportunity. I was kind of thinking what you just said, that we should maybe create an opportunity, and was wondering, and me being just kind of unaware of processes in the legislature, hadn't been aware that it's only the Speaker's office and governor who can decide what bills. Wonder if there's a public way to make that request to them to consider this. I don't know if that involves like a letter or a resolution or something that says, that kind of highlights the background, that this was a bill that fell victim to, the end of the 2020 session, and that it was on its path to passage, and that we would hope that the leadership of the state considers as part of the overall transparency package. And that way we put the decision back towards them. And I don't know if that would be any helpful strategy for that. But I also did have a question about from what Todd said as well. I again, from my lack of knowledge, does the added green portion require any kind of like fiscal analysis that would delay the passage of the more clarified parts?
Todd, do you want to take that one? Do you think there'd be a fiscal impact to these changes?
Honestly, I'm uncertain. The advocate had hiring authority before. This just rephrases it a little bit differently. I don't know if removing the advocate from the requirements of ORS 240 would have an impact. I do recall even under the the original version of the bill that the council passed, there was a fiscal from DAS in terms of their loss of FTEs and the money that would flow out from them and into the new office. So I presume if there were the need for so in one, it seems like even though that other bill didn't address financial issues, it still generated a fiscal, which of course is controversial, but nevertheless occurred. So if we're just trying to provide clarifying language around that, it might again require a fiscal, but likely with the same results, that it's merely a movement of funds out of DAS into the office. I don't know if Adam or anyone else could speak more intelligently to that than I could.
Yeah. This is Mark Landauer. There's a requirement that any bill that goes to a work session have a fiscal impact and revenue impact statement before the bill can be worked. So that applies to every single bill. And so it's likely that you would get the same type of fiscal impact that we did during the previous session.
And hey, everybody, this is Adam Crawford. Yeah, just want to echo what Mark just said. So the one additional piece I'd probably want to put on top of this to highlight it, I think the changes before us are great. What the bill is silent on, however, is a revenue stream for the PRAC. Where is the money coming from to otherwise put into the budget? I'd like to talk a little bit more about that at some point. The issue you had, I think, with the original Senate Bill 1506 was while money was leaving DAS and the Secretary of State, nowhere was the money put. So while the thought would be that in another bill, that maybe in a program change bill at the end of 2021, or excuse me, 2020, that it would appear as a line item within a budget bill. I don't know if that ever occurred towards the end of session. So it's just something I think the group should be aware of, that at some point there's probably going to be a conversation about, is this another funds agency? Is this a general funds agency? How do you want to crack that nut? But happy to talk more if anybody has any questions.
Okay.
Well, the reason I brought it up, this is Tony, was just curious if that would need for an analysis would delay or cause any of the other reform bills that are up for the special session. I also hesitate that our actions, like similarly to what we talked about with the COVID special session discussion, having any kind of delay or distraction to the bills that are being proposed, especially by our leaders of color. So I am wondering so that question. And two, just since we're talking about revenue, I also was wondering about, this is kind of what I was going to talk about later, but again, since we're talking about revenue, what are there ways to apply for grants for community education on broader, public awareness for records requests and or for the other side? I kind of percolating on an idea, so I was just kind of wondering if that is an option under this kind of law. Thank you.
The grants question, I know at least internally at Archives, we have to get authority to spend federal money if it's a federal grant. So that has to be approved through the legislature. So we have to know in advance that we're could be receiving federal money. I don't know, Adam, do you want to, are you a budget expert? Are there considerations for grant funding?
No, I'm not a budget expert, but I can flail around for a while and try to answer it.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. And if this is again something that I wasn't planning to. This
No,
isn't
that's
to add
okay.
onto this right now. Yeah, so.
No, I can give you my 10-cent answer because that's about what it's worth. The two parts that you're going to want to think of a budget kind of like debits and credits. The legislature has the authority to provide this office funding, basically that budget that otherwise they can spend. However, it's set up in a series of limitations about how that money can be spent. It can be spent if this office is given $1 million and 800K of that $1 million is focused in one area, the expectation is it's going to be spent there. A lot of times you'll see in emergency boards or future Ways and Means hearings is grant requests and proposals. Either these would be grant requests made by the agency to go after certain amounts of money. And so I think it's totally possible for something like that to occur. However, I think it needs to be built within the budget as you're building the budget and as you move forward. Though all of that said, this is really a great conversation for you all to have with a legislative fiscal office person who would really be able to give you the nuts and bolts of it all.
Thank you, Adam.
Great. Thank you.
I see that Rob Bavette has joined us. Hi, Rob. We were discussing, I think before you joined us, the idea of trying to find a path for this bill in a special session. And folks were weighing in on the likelihood of that and possible avenues. So I just wanted to loop you in a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much. I know one particular window closes probably this evening at 5 o'clock, but I think it's probably highly unlikely the legislature would take this up in the first special session, although who the heck knows. But I'm also hearing there's a likelihood of at least one and probably two more special sessions throughout the summer.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you. So I think the thing that we can do now to get us closer to that would be to vote as a council on which path we would like to take. If we would like to approve some of these modifications suggested by Todd. If so, which ones? I don't know if there needs to be more discussion or if we want to vote on each modification proposed by Todd individually. Any conversation that needs to happen around any of these before I propose votes? Or
Yeah, this is Les.
Hi, Les.
So, listening to the conversation, to me, the most foundational need for this bill is to establish the independence of the council. The amendments are all technical amendments that don't really go to the heart of the principle of the changes. I'm wondering, why not take a vote to ask the June 24th session leadership to move Senate Bill 1506 as it was at the end of the session, and then we can come back in either the subsequent sessions or in the 2021 session with the technical amendments. But I'm agreeing particularly with Steve Suo that there's a high commitment among public officials right now and a high public interest in transparency issues of all sorts. And I hate to miss any opportunity to advance, again, what I see as the core purpose of this legislation, which is to build a fence around the Public Records Council. So I'd propose that we move, I'm not making a motion, I'm just throwing this out as a strategy to move Senate Bill 1506 as it came out of the last session, and then deal with the amendments at another time, so that during any special session, it is a simple revitalization of what people have already discussed. It's my sense that anytime you start tinkering with the bill, you are opening the door to conversations that can encumber the success of the bill. So, we would have nothing to lose if we advanced 1506 and it passed, or if it failed, then we still have the opportunity to come back with the amended version.
Yeah,
this is Mark Landauer. I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. Frankly, I think that if we as a council are going to push for this to be considered during the special session, I think that we should be updating the work that we've done. I don't think, we've had conversations. We've been working on this for some time. We've had some more time to, frankly, digest and consider a lot of differing opinions and thoughts on this. I'm also grateful to the fact that Todd has really, sat down and thought through this from an implementation standpoint. If this council chooses to go forward, it would be my recommendation, despite the fact that we had success during the short session, that we push the new and improved language rather than the older language, simply because it will resolve some of the issues in particular that Todd had discussed previously. I think that if you can get this done with one stroke of the pen rather than having to come back, that's a better result. That's my personal opinion. And I would, if again, this council decides to move forward on this, I would really recommend that we go with the new and improved rather than the older version, despite the older version's, seeming success.
Mark,
This is Senator Thatcher. Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Thatcher.
I agree with what Les said. I think we need to figure out if we approve of all this language. I wish I had thought of a couple of my concerns earlier, but I have some questions about some of this language, and that might actually stall things, because I'm sure I would not be the only one with a couple of questions about that. And so I think it's a very wise move to just deal with what will succeed and then come back at it. But maybe we're putting the cart before the horse, since we haven't really accepted all the language. We haven't made it a motion to do that yet. So, and I also think it's a good idea to either as a council send a letter to the governor and perhaps the leadership, the Senate president and the speaker, to talk about our desire to get this moved during a special session and put it in context of everything that's going on around transparency right now.
Okay, I can work on that. This is Stephanie. Who else? Someone else was speaking up. Was it Emily?
Yeah, it was, but my question actually just got answered. Thanks, Senator.
So can I ask a question of either Adam or Todd? This is just my own, not fully understanding how budgets work, but if this office does shift over to a different, I guess, funding model, or if these changes are made mid-biennium, what does that actually look like for the functioning of the office now? Do you guys understand my question, Adam or Todd?
I do. It's Todd, and maybe Adam will have something different to say, but I think if the initial bill goes through and passes, the money stays with DAS unless or until there's a legislative change that reappropriates it directly to the office. If the modified version goes through, I think the money would be transferred upon passage of the effective date of the bill. But Adam, you could correct me if I'm wrong.
I think I have a little bit of a different perspective, and I guess I'll put a finer point on what I tried to say a little earlier. My concern is if your original bill goes through in the original format with the original fiscal, the money and the positions from DAS go away, but there was no additional agency to which they went. Another way of saying that would be you would have created an independent agency with absolutely zero budget. And so there would have to be some subsequent action down in Ways and Means to actually create a budget to which this would go. So I think if there was a way we could otherwise address that either within whatever measure gets taken up next week or in 2021 or whenever it does get taken up, I just don't want to make sure, I want to make sure you guys have a budget to do what you need to do and what you see fit.
So are you saying, sorry, this is Steve. Are you saying, Adam, that essentially the bill as originally drafted would cause the office to be completely defunded?
That was my original thought. When I pull up the fiscal for your original bill with the amendments, I see money leaving the agency. I don't see money being created anywhere. I think that was the reason why the bill had to go down to Ways and Means originally. I know there was some thought that that would cause problems, and let's be real, it does sometimes, but that's where those budgetary decisions are made about what is the revenue, what's the revenue for the agency, how much can you spend on services and supplies, that sort of thing, how many positions do you get? And so that would be where all of those conversations happen.
It's Emily. So is this the part that's like line 22, 20 through 26 in the green and red marked copy?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the red, the old,
the green.
The green is the new proposed version, but the red version, Adam, is what you're saying is the original fiscal that the money leaves DAS but doesn't go anywhere. So essentially, we have an unfunded office. Am I looking at the right place?
The red is
no, Emily,
removing them from
Todd.
here at archives. Yeah.
Right. The red takes away the requirement that DAS provide the advocate with office facilities, et cetera, or that archives does, and that if archives won't, DAS will, which is necessary to be an independent agency. But no, so this bill does not include the original budget appropriation. It was in SB 106 that created the office, but did not become part of the ORS section. But the green is the part that would then take the budget into the advocate's office.
Okay, so that 9A is what would provide, if I'm understanding this right, would provide for money to come to the advocate's office.
Yes. And Adam, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, but Adam, I appreciate you putting that into finer detail because that was the sense I got from DAS. I just misunderstood how the money handoff would occur. Apparently it must be quite explicit by the legislature, and that's very important for everyone to keep in mind.
Yeah, I guess my only concern, and again, not a legislative expert, not a budget expert, my only concern with pursuing the special session was that it would then throw the office into a weird administrative limbo if it didn't have the fund specified. Yeah, so again, not an expert, but I was a little bit personally worried about that.
You mean if it passed
yes.
the way it was discussed in the 2020 session, the
mid-biennium, yes. Yeah, mid-biennium, yes.
Look, this is Steve. So why is it necessary to take away the provisions for the state archivist or DAS to house the PRA? I mean, I recognize that that's kind of the ultimate goal as a step toward independence, but if we don't have, there's not true fiscal independence here. There's not a dedicated funding stream. So, I mean, that's what seems to be posing the problem, the fact that we're striking the state archives and DAS from the legislation, right? How essential is that to strike those?
Steve, if the bill, it's Todd again, if the bill passes in its original form and you leave in the language about DAS and state archives, they can provide me a desk, but they can't pay my salary and or any other employees.
So you're saying 1506 as drafted eliminated those provisions for state archives and DAS?
No, they didn't.
No,
but that isn't where his salary is coming from.
Right, I would have a desk with no salary if 1506 passed in its original form, unless or until the legislature appropriated the money in a separate action to the newly independent advocate's office.
And why did
sorry, Todd, what part of 1506 removes your salary?
The part that says the office is independent but does not include creating a line item in the state budget for the advocate's office to receive its own budget.
Simply because it says it's independent, you're saying it's implicit
Correct.
that it no longer gets to take money from the general fund.
It no
or the
longer,
existing fund.
the money
Through
that,
DAS.
well, the money that was created for it went to DAS. Creating an independent office with no further clarification takes the money away from DAS and doesn't give it to anybody else to administer, including the advocate's office.
This is Emily. Why did it get so far in the legislature with this huge gap?
So I think I could probably try to take, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Adam. I was ready to try to field that, but you're in a better.
I think the intention was going to be that at the end of session, there was going to be a cleanup bill where that's where you got your budget. Generally speaking, there's a program change bill that addresses all of this. My concern with maybe moving forward in a short session is there's a lot of cracks for this to fall through. And I wouldn't want to put you in that position. Obviously, we didn't ask to try to do our level best, but it's absent as explicit funding authority from the legislature. That's how you get your money, and that's how you can do what you need to do.
This is Michael Crone.
Hi, Michael.
I'm a little bit late to the meeting. Sorry, guys. But it sounds like we're talking about maybe trying to move forward in the upcoming special session next week. I guess I may have missed this already, but do we have any indication from like Tina Kotek or Peter Courtney or anyone in any legislative leadership position that they would have any interest in doing that? Does anyone have any, like, it seems completely crazy to me, I'm just going to say.
Michael, I think
There's one way
other
to find out,
sessions.
Michael.
Yeah, I think they were thinking
Yeah, I
other
think so.
special sessions, not the one next week or whatever.
And whether it's next week or the next two, I think what you missed, Michael, is the fact that, and here's why I support something happening soon, is the fact that public records is the key to public trust, and that just everyone needs to have better trust in government right now, and this bill helps accomplish that, and it seems to fit, like Steve said and other people on the council today, seems to fit with the current will of the people, and so I definitely think it should be brought up, and I definitely, after this vote, support some sort of letter to the leadership to ask them to consider it.
I think it is something that SPJ may be raising in conversations. So there may be some conversations going on about it already, although from what I understand, sounds like it's not on a list of bills. Senator Thatcher was noting that lawmakers can't introduce any bills in the special session, but can amend them, and that might be a possible way forward. And then we were discussing, Michael, if the bill in the form that it passed it passed the Senate and seems to be on its path to pass the House earlier this year, if that was a wise, if we wanted to, ask the leadership to consider this in a package of transparency bills along the lines of public trust issues, whether the bill that was familiar to lawmakers would be better to get through, or whether we need to fix it first and just let them know, hey, we responded to concerns you had. This is, this solves the problems that were flagged during the session. With the time was intended to be cleaned up at the end. So it's in line with what your expectations were before. So that's where we were in the middle of the discussion when you joined, and I'm glad you're here.
Okay, well, so
Michael,
for what it's worth, go ahead. You can speak instead of me.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, man. I have a bad habit of trying to interrupt. Go ahead, man.
I was just going to say that I do not see how this can credibly be couched as police reform or COVID response and have no interest in being perceived as trying to hijack a special session for this, even though I do agree that this is important. So if there's another special session that's going to be announced or something, then maybe that's a different conversation. Michael, I think there are a lot of, okay, go ahead, Steve.
No, I'll let you finish.
I was just going to say, I think there are a lot of interest groups that would be interested in maybe making similar arguments about their particular issues, and I think most of them are going to decide not to do it. So that's the end. Everyone else can talk now.
I hear what you're saying, Michael. I don't think it's a specious argument to say that transparency, it's a big part of the discussion when it comes to criminal justice reform. And, you know, access to police records, you know, it's very difficult to see a world where the public can keep an eye on what police officers are doing without access to records. And this is, you know, this does not speak specifically to police records. It speaks to public records in general and the importance of this agency to ensuring access to public records in general. I think there's a solid argument to be made. Now, does that prevail? I don't know. But I don't think anybody's going to see this as you know, an attempt to hijack the process simply for our own priorities. I mean, there is a genuine public good to be had here.
It's Emily. I would, I mean, I think what you're saying, you know, does make sense, both of you. I mean, I think there's a common thread on this council and, you know, sort of everywhere you turn that there's some very big, enormous issues that have very direct impact on people's lives, looking at the impact of COVID, the economic crisis, the police accountability. I mean, these are huge issues that have very, very direct impacts. I think the argument that Steve's making is that this is something that has general agreement and has one of those very key indirect impacts. What's going to happen when somebody wants to see police records and gets into a dispute about it? Who are they going to turn to? How independent is that office? So these are not like forefront issues, but I think everyone recognizes that the way that policy really happens is not necessarily always in that very, very forefront emergency, directly touching your life kind of way. A lot of times your life gets touched by policies that are the second tier, that are behind the scenes. And I would say that this is one of those that, you know, has a potential to be very impactful, but yes, would feel removed if you tried to explain it, for example, to somebody who is wondering why the heck they don't have an unemployment check, or who has been beaten up in a way that they feel violates their civil rights. But it's one of those secondary pieces that I think plays a role in gaining greater trust, and it is something that has shown to have support across the aisle. So while I would not want to be seen as attempting to hijack very crucial issues to Oregonians, I feel that this is something that potentially is something that has broad agreement, that isn't in the public eye and consciousness in the way that, you know, arguably it should, but can have an impact, and so is worthy of potentially putting forward. And as far as it's not, I mean, when I look at the coverage of the COVID crisis, a big piece of that, you know, trying to get accurate information to the public about what is going on, how their state government is responding to this, has to do also with access to records. And so it's not isolated, they're not disconnected. And I totally hear you, Michael, that there's a ton going on. And I would argue that there's probably a lot of people who want to get stuff through these sessions that actually are totally irrelevant to these particular foci that the lawmakers need to take up right now. But I don't think this is one of those. It's something we can decide whether we would like to recommend this go forward. Like I said, there may be other people that are looking to push it forward in some other way, but I do feel that it's relevant.
This is Les. Thanks for that, Emily. I get, and Michael, I understand your point that on the face of it, it just seems absolutely nuts. But I think the point is, if we don't ask, we have zero chance of success. If we ask now to push through the original bill or whatever the council wants to advance, chances are we'll be told no. But there may be a chance, for the reasons that Steve and Emily have articulated, that we may strike at the right moment. And so my preference, frankly, is for the council to advance this as soon as possible. If the leadership says they don't want to take it up this session, we've lost nothing. If leadership says, this makes sense, then we're advancing the core principle I addressed just before you joined us. So my thinking is that my recommendation for the rest of the council is that we push. We have nothing to lose. But I have a technical question though for our legislative budget wizards. Doesn't in Senate Bill 1506, doesn't 8A sort of provide a porthole for funding until the budgetary issues are resolved?
Hey Les, this is Adam. I don't know that I'd ever call myself a budgetary wizard, but I just pulled up the fiscal for 1506, and generally speaking, there's a series of kind of just a budget generally attached to it, and that ultimately shows up in some sort of bill later on down the road. I think we do our level best from DAS to make sure whatever transition was as smooth as possible. But I do think ultimately the revenue question is going to have to get answered, whether it's within this bill or whether that's in another vehicle. If it did go in front of a special session, I'd leave to the wisdom of the legislature.
Stephanie, if I may, it's Todd.
Yeah, please.
Les, to answer your question, 8A does not address paying the advocate and any other employees. It may not even address the ability to pay for travel if travel becomes possible again to provide training, as well as potentially technical resources to do the online training that I'm doing right now. It depends on how you want to parse terms like administrative support. But either way, 8A or B does not cover salaries, which, as you could guess, is kind of important to me in particular.
None of us want anybody to work for free.
Okay.
I assume.
So what I'm hearing is we've got some folks that think we should pursue SB 1506 as written, and see if I, as the council chair, can work some magic and try to get some letters out to the powers that be. Or do we want to consider some of these changes? I know Senator Thatcher said she might have questions or issues with them. We have not voted on a single aspect of this as a council. Do we want to iron that out today? I feel like if you are wanting me to hit some sort of gas pedal on pursuing this in a special session, I would need to know that today, what language we're going with. So does anyone have strong feelings either way, or do I just take that to a vote?
This is Mark Landauer. I certainly understand what Senator Thatcher was saying. Go with the horse that at least almost got you to the finish line, and I certainly respect that that opinion and perspective. I think it would be worthwhile for us to go through the changes, act upon those changes, and ask the question of Senator Thatcher, does this give you discomfort? Because, and the reason I say this is due to the previous discussion we just had. I think that the budget is a real important aspect of this. And, this thing is, this special session is going to last maybe a couple of days. That's a lot of paperwork, and a lot of things can fall through the cracks, as Mr. Crawford had mentioned. So I'm interested to see where we are as a council on the updated version, and then to see whether or not there are any questions that Senator Thatcher have. And And if she's comfortable, despite the fact that we don't have representative power here to join us, at a minimum, I do think if we were to go with 1506, we would still have to address the budget challenge and add new language to that. So that's sort of where I'm sitting at the moment.
This is Steve. I agree with what Mark said. I think that's a worthwhile discussion to move us forward.
I do too. It's Emily. I think it's a good time to figure out where we are on the bills. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll just go through section by section. The first item that I had that I was going to call for a vote would be the introductory language of changing that from as an independent office in the executive department, changing it to the public records advocate shall function separately and independently from any other state agency. So that's the first item, I guess, up for a vote. So Senator Thatcher,
I had a question on it.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I did have a question on that one. The question I wrote down, and it's been bandied around a little bit since then, is would that language preclude use of another agency's meeting facilities, especially since the 9A and B were crossed out?
Yeah. Todd, do you have any answers on that one?
Absolutely. Some of it born from experience elsewhere in state government, but when I worked at the Oregon Department of Justice, we frequently had to work with other state agencies, including preparing witnesses for deposition, using travel plans, et cetera. And we routinely were able to strike up agreements with other agencies to use facilities to the extent that I almost flew on a Forest Service plane across the state when I needed to go to Eastern Oregon. Ultimately, that wasn't necessary. But I think it's quite common for agencies to work with each other, either unofficially or through interagency agreements. And that's something I would look to continue doing, or the next advocate would look to need to continue doing, but I don't think it creates a structural problem at the outset.
Well, then I guess I have to ask, I'm not clear why we're getting rid of the lines 9A and B, talking about the state archivist may furnish office facilities and provide administrative support to the advocate. And if they decline, I mean, why are we striking that language?
Yeah.
I could speak to that as well. It just goes towards sharpening the independence lens, making it clear that the office is one that stands on its own and pays its own way, because there's no, as far as I'm aware, any other state agency that's housed within another state agency without paying for that. And so I'm just trying to bring the office in. I'm trying to do this in two things: keep the advocate's office independent, but also create a sustainable, structurally sound state agency that looks like any other and for all other like administrative respects. And so this would just bring it in line with other agencies about how they operate, and that they don't get to coexist with another agency without paying for it. And I must say there has been some confusion, even anecdotally, I've heard at times within Secretary of State about what is their kind of relationship to the office. Like, do they get a say in the office choosing to leave or not? And I would say no, they do not. But the existing language creates confusion that would be eliminated by just making the office, the Public Records Advocate office, look like any other state agency, and that would need to go through the necessary processes to work with any other state agency. So again, this is just more standardization of day-to-day practice, in my opinion.
Okay, I can buy that.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or questions about the introductory language?
This is Steve. So can you walk us through the change? I think the change in 4611, we 1506 originally had as an independent office in the executive department. I think is that
correct? Yeah, the language would be. Yeah, go ahead.
So the new language, I think Todd said that was because he tried to pattern it after language in the long-term care ombudsman's statute, which makes sense to me. But I guess because that seems to be the thing that defunds the agency without, unless we do this other thing with the Treasury. I mean, how essential is that in terms of, as a practical matter, independence for the agency?
Can I speak to that, Stephanie, for a moment?
Yes, please.
If the question is my language going to defund the office, whereas the original language does not? I think the answer is no. And in fact, I don't think the current language of as an independent office in the executive department was even the PRAC's final decision. It was what was chosen by Ledge Council. So I think ultimately all this language is up to Ledge Council's purview to change as they see it fitting best into the form of the statute should take. But that being said, any version of this language that makes the office independent then takes the money away from DAS and leaves it in limbo until it's appropriated to the advocate's office, regardless of what your stylistic or policy preference is in stating this language.
So that's true even if it says in the executive department.
Yes, because just like any other state agency, it's under the governor, so it's in the executive department, but it's still its own agency and has to have its own money appropriated to it, or have it kept at DAS, but something has to be affirmatively said either way.
And Adam, can I ask you, is that your understanding as well?
It is. I think the original language, and I appreciate, Todd, you pointing out that while I think all of us getting together and kind of agreeing on what the PRAC wants to submit to LC, Ledge Council, is important, but ultimately Legislative Council is the one who puts pen to paper on this. I think either way, by creating an independent agency, you are now independent in all ways, shapes, and forms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess we are voting on either the SB 1506 language or Todd's modification.
I'll go ahead and move. I think that I heard the key words that I needed to hear. I'll buy that. So I'd move that the language highlighted in green on lines 7 and 7.5 be approved by the council.
I'll second that.
Is it timely to make a friendly amendment?
Sure.
I think since we're still kind of haven't resolved the question of whether we move 1506 as written or a new bill, maybe these votes that we're going to take should be in the context of, do we support the concept of adding these things, still reserving the right to go back to, strategically speaking, to go back to pushing 1506 as drafted.
Yes, I think we can do both of those things today. I think we can decide what our next steps are and also talk about the nuances of, because we can't move forward with a new version of the bill if we don't all agree on it. So I think we're trying to get to that point, and then we can decide as a council which we want to do.
I have a process question.
Yeah.
We were talking about one section, say, do we accept this section?
Yeah.
And then we didn't talk about any of the others. And I do have another question on another section of the bill. So
yeah, I didn't know what to expect from people. So I actually have 5 different voting sheets prepared for 5 different categories of discussion because I didn't know how else to do it. Because I feel like the changes are different from each other.
And this is Mark Landauer. Having heard that Stephanie had 5 different sections that she wanted the council to review, it was my intent, Senator, to go through each one of those individually and have a discussion, just to be clear.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Stephanie, with your magic juggling. I really appreciate your approach of like, yes, I think we can manage all these intense and decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Sure.
that. So should the motion be worded in any particular way to do that? I don't know how strict
No.
these
No, I mean, I think right now the council is considering each category. Basically, I think the way Mark proposed it was adopting Todd's language, like yay or nay, is the way that we're going to be, I think, working
but
through
with
these,
that
right,
way,
Mark?
With a healthy conversation before the yay or nay.
Correct.
Okay, and so then, but the question Steve raised about, so if we say yay to this, are we, also open to pushing it forward or attempting, like asking leadership to consider it in the form that they considered it in the February session? Like, I mean,
Correct.
do we have to? Okay, so that's what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
We're just voicing support for this particular clause.
Yeah.
Say it again?
Yeah.
We're just voicing support for a particular clause. We're not saying we support pushing the bill, amending the
Correct.
1506 to do this and pushing it forward. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that conversation comes after we dispense with the 5 changes.
Yes, that was my intention, is to get it to a place where we've all voted on it and then ultimately vote on which version we're going to go with in terms of what I'm starting to shop around. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay. So I think I heard a second. I would like to do a roll call, if that's okay. So Emily, yay or nay?
Is it?
Oh, Michael?
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask if it's possible to have a little more discussion, because I guess I'm just on this particular change. I heard Senator Thatcher say that it raised concerns for her, and I can see how the language change actually more strongly indicates that functioning has to be completely independent of other agencies than the language in 1506. And then I also heard Todd say that this change is not one that he considers vital. So did I misunderstand either of those 2 points?
Todd, do you want to address that?
Sure. I like it because I think it more clearly states the intention of the office aligns with an existing office that is similar. But no, because I'm not wedded to this, because 1, it's the council's decision, not mine, and 2, Ledge Council could very easily change it again like they did. I just think it's distinct and comports with any existing precedent, but yeah, I don't think it makes or breaks the bill.
All right. Well, I'm not opposed to it, but I'm going to vote no, because it doesn't seem like we're getting a lot in exchange for possible confusion. So that's not because I think your language is bad, but that's how I'll be voting.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Do others want to have more discussion before voting?
I just wanted to ask Michael, it's Emily, the possible confusion. Could you just be specific in what you mean?
Right. So Senator Thatcher's initial question was about whether this would preclude things like using other agencies' office space. And I think that kind of question derives from the fact that the revised language says specifically that it shall function independently of any other agency, which is new language. And I don't think that it would be interpreted that way ultimately as a legal matter. But I also don't think that the difference in terms of independence means anything. So I don't really see a reason to adopt a change if it's just going to create confusion.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So we have a no from Michael. Let's see. I guess I can try a vote. We'll see what happens. Emily?
Well, I'm kind of torn. I mean, I like the stronger language. I appreciate the fact that nothing is sacred in a bill proposal. And I hear Michael's concerns, and I have interest in, I think it is easier for people to take up a bill they've already looked at. So I think with the eye that I would like to try to move this forward sometime this summer, I'm going to vote for the old language. So I guess that would be a no on this change.
Thank you. Steve?
Sorry, I'm kind of in the same spot as Emily. I basically, I want to, I give a lot of deference and weight to Todd's opinion here. And, that said, if it's not buying us that much, and if it's not that essential to you, Todd, then, yeah, I guess I'm kind of I'm with Michael. I'll vote no.
Okay, Les?
I'm sorry, I still disconnected myself. What's the motion before us, please?
The motion is to adopt Todd's language, that's the one highlighted in green. The public records advocate shall function separately and independently from any other state agency.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed the conversation, but I guess I'll vote yes.
Okay. Rob?
I just want to adopt the comments that Steve made, and I'll vote no.
Okay, Mark?
Well, this is very interesting, isn't it? Because I made the motion.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be stubborn and make this fun. I'm going to vote yes.
Okay. We don't have Sharon. Tony?
I think, and we're going to vote individually on the rest of the sections, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I agree with Michael. I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Adam?
I vote yes.
Okay. And I'm voting yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. Does that mean that it does not move forward? Do I need a majority? I have a majority. Let's see. Yeah. So 5 voted no, and 4 voted yes on that.
It's so tough because it just sort of depends. Like, I mean, if we have to come back to this next year, I could see this language, as being
Sure.
better. So it's tough not knowing like what we're doing with it.
Correct. I agree.
Makes it very difficult.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I would share that sentiment. I mean, I want the absolute strongest declaration of independence we can have. And so it feels odd to be voting no on this. I would support it 100% if it were coming back in 2021.
Okay.
And I probably could be if I could be persuaded that like Mark said earlier, if this can be sold as new and improved, then I would be all for it. It comes down to a political calculus, and I don't know the right way to judge that.
Okay. The next item that I have up for vote would be the topic 2, which is adding the sentence, the Office of the Public Records Advocate is exempt from ORS Chapter 240. These are the HR statute language that was discussed during the April meeting. Adam or Todd, do you want to speak to why that is an important thing to add?
Do you want me to take this one, Todd?
Yes, please, Adam.
Yeah, thanks. For everybody, this is Adam Crawford. This was the change that I was hoping that we could get into the bill. Basically, ORS 240 is HR rules by and large for the entire executive branch. There are some exemptions, namely independent agencies and statewide elected officials like the Secretary of State and Treasurer. They function under their own HR authority. Everyone else kind of functions under, everyone else doesn't kind of, everyone else functions under DAS authority, under ORS 240. What I hear a lot from this group is the desire for strong independence. And this is going to get you closer to that goal. by being exempt from DAS's authority under ORS Chapter 240.
Thank you, Adam. Does anyone have any questions, comments about this before we vote?
Yes, thank you, Adam. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Senator.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did have a question about that, and I get that even if it was an independent agency, it would have to go under DAS for some reason. That's kind of weird, but it seems like if it was going to be an independent agency, then it would be an independent agency, and all the stuff surrounding pay equity, I guess that was the term, should be within the office. But there's also, it just kind of struck me as making an agency exempt from the law it doesn't look great for all the other people that don't get to opt out. But I guess what you're saying is you would be following the law, but within your own agency and not in the context of DAS. Is that correct?
Hello, Senator Thatcher. This is Adam again. Yes, that's correct. This new agency would still be subject to all the other pay equity provisions and these sorts of things. But one of the main parts of ORS 240 is around classification and compensation. And there are certain rules about how agencies are structured and how positions are paid. There are very few agencies of a two-person size that I think these two positions are a PEMG and an OPA 4. And Todd, you may correct me if I'm wrong about that. It's pretty rare. Those are two fairly high-paying positions. It's pretty rare that a two-person agency would have that kind of breakdown. So by making this office exempt from Chapter 240, the classification and compensation decisions are left to the legislature to decide who should get paid. And it's at that point, while all the other staff and HR rules as it comes to pay equity would still apply, ultimately the payment and salaries of these two positions would be left to the legislature to determine.
Okay, I just was questioning it because it says exempt from this entire chapter. That's what made me question it.
Yeah. Emily, did you have questions?
Yeah, thank you. One is following up on the senator's question. Is there clearer language than a blanket exempt? And also, Adam, you mentioned that there are some exemptions to following Chapter 240, Treasury, et cetera. And I think you said including independent agencies. So I'm just wondering, like, if this is an independent agency, does the exemption from 240 that you've highlighted it as important, like, does that have to be spelled out, or is that already built in? Does that question make sense?
It does. I would encourage you to spell it out. I don't think it is in the generating or originating language, the idea that by creating an independent or a semi-independent agency, ultimately they would not be exempt from ORS 240, absent a clear exemption from ORS 240. And so there needs to be a definitive, I would argue, there needs to be a definitive policy statement from the legislature making it very clear that DAS has no authority when it comes to the public records advocate regarding any topic within ORS 240.
Okay, thank you. And is B supposed to clarify the exempt, or just following up on Peter's question about whether exempt,
B is not part of the vote. B is a separate vote.
Okay, but just trying to follow up on clarifying this question, whether there's a way to fine tune so it's not as broad or doesn't come across as broad, trying to address this question that Senator Thatcher brought up.
I think, Todd, doesn't kind of the next section go into such detail because you're exempting it from 240, or are they not related?
They are related, and also relates to just the office being able to determine its own path, again, with the advocate wearing the administrative hat of an agency director.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Emily. Todd, is there additional language that might be helpful? I don't know what folks would want to see there. Maybe
For
Emily.
Chapter 240?
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like B actually, B is there because you're exempt, but it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't like clarify what parts of 240 you're exempt from and what parts you're not exempt from.
So
Right.
you're exempt from the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I may say in furtherance of what Adam said or related to that is the office would not be exempted from any laws of statewide applicability like anti-discrimination laws and pay equity, et cetera. It merely takes us out of the purview of DAS to decide how those laws are administrated for our agency. That's how I'm reading it. So I don't think saying we're exempt from ORS Chapter 240 in any way implies the office is not exempt from the laws that all government employees and agencies are subject to. And it's direct, this statement, but I think it's clean for that reason because it's meant to be very clear as to what it is saying, but doesn't remove us from other obligations. And I don't know if there's any way to say this that might ameliorate people's concerns, but still be accurate.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, a question, I'm sorry, Tony. Is this the portion, you said earlier that basically the way it's written now, we're not going to get in a situation where you won't have a budget or there won't be a limbo situation. So I just kind of, this is the part I plan to support because it sounds like this makes it even more detailed into what we're trying to accomplish. And I appreciate the clarification from Adam on that.
I have to say,
Yeah,
I appreciate the clarification too. So just thank you for answering my question. I'm done.
Okay. Do we have any more comments? All right. Oh, Michael?
Yes, I was about to make one. Thanks, Stephanie. So I think that I support this, but I'm also not entirely sure I know what all we're exempting the office from, nor what rules are going to apply completely in the alternative. And I think that if I were going to support moving forward in the short session, that I would probably vote no on this because people are likely to ask these questions. And I think the more questions people have about this bill, the less likely you are to get it passed in the short session. But since I'm not in favor of moving forward in the short session, I think that those are questions that we could answer in the longer session, and it seems like good policy to me. So I think that I'm in favor of it. The other advantage of not moving forward in the special session, of course, being that we have a little more time to understand what it is that we would be exempting the office from and what standards would replace it, which would also be helpful. But those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Michael. That's a great point. Do others have thoughts?
Well, it's Emily again. I just wanted to ask Adam, I mean, is it known? Is like, if you say it's exempt from ORS Chapter 240, I mean, like, is that known, like in the inner working mechanisms of how this stuff all happens in state government, or is it actually a question that we would either want to clarify in this language or that there isn't an easy answer to when lawmakers ask the question?
Hey, Emily, this is Adam. I appreciate the question. I think you got kind of a fundamental, and I'll make subtext text here. It seems like part of the reason we got into this situation is that there were unclear or blurred lines between what is and what is not the authority of either the governor or people appointed by the governor. What this was offered to be was to make it very clear that when it comes to DAS and it comes to the HR rules of DAS, that and the policies and all of the various inner workings of that this office stands to the side of that. along with other independently elected officials. I think drawing as many bright lines as you can in a way that otherwise satisfies the need of the PRAC, I think is a beneficial thing. I cannot stand on certainty and say that 90 members of the legislature know what ORS 240 means and what that interplay is. But I'm happy to talk with whomever has questions or anything like that as this item comes up or moves further. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Emily, to your satisfaction, or if there's any clarifying stuff there.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
I can say I've heard of it as a state agency manager who is also exempt, being part of Secretary of State's office. We're an independent office. So I've heard of 240. I've heard of that in HR speak, but again, I don't know that all the members of the legislature would have, because it's a little bit state agency interworkings. Okay, well, I guess I will bring this to a vote or attempt to. Does anyone have any other conversation before that, or do we just want to have a vote on this one? Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the language, the Office of the Public Records Advocate is exempt from ORS Chapter 240?
I will so move, and also move that we strike the language highlighted in red immediately preceding it.
Thank you, Michael. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm going to do a roll call again for this. So I am voting in favor of this. Emily?
Yeah, it sounds to me like there are some easy explainers to the question if you have comps with other agencies. And Adam, I'm grateful to your willingness to talk with people about it if there are questions and be available for that. I'm voting in favor.
Steve?
Aye.
Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Sharon? Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Moving on to number 3. Duties of the deputy, well, not necessarily duties, delegation authority, compensation, all of this HR stuff here that Todd added. Todd, do you want to talk a little bit about this to remind people?
Sure, Stephanie. So are we addressing, can you just tell me which sections we're addressing as part of this vote?
Yeah, sorry, where it starts with 21B, that, or line 21, that entire, I grouped all of these together, the 2 paragraphs basically. I guess it's 7B all the way down through 8A, B, C. Yeah, I was thinking that would be one discussion topic.
Sure. Let me just.
And I can pull up your notes.
So yeah, I'm looking at my notes now too. These represent interrelated concepts, including the difficulty of, well, I think again, it goes towards this establishing a bright line that this is in fact its own independent state agencies with internal processes that are subject to the discretion of the advocate with oversight by the council, will not control or determination by any outside forces, as would be the case with any other state agency. So it establishes a clear deputy who can stand in the place of an advocate and automatically succeeds the advocate when the advocate departs the position until a permanent one is appointed, selected, yes. And it just gives the advocate agency director authority to establish staff as needed, including the deputy and others. And I purposely created or included language that said, I may fix the compensation of a person as deputy advocate and then of others, because I think it's important to make that distinction here for other language I had suggested, which is that the deputy must be well, I'm not sure if that's actually in this draft. That the deputy be an admitted attorney as well. Is that still in here too?
Yes.
Sorry, I think my eyes are starting to blur looking at this so much.
Yeah, 8A. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. And the reason for that goes along with everything else that happened. You know, when I interviewed for my position as deputy, there were others who were not attorneys who interviewed, including people from the journalism community, and rightly so. However, if anyone who was hired as deputy was not an attorney at the time that Ginger departed the office, under the statute, they could not have become the acting advocate, and therefore the office would have at least officially been left leaderless, although of course, presumably whomever was the deputy would have stepped up and taken care of the office. So I think to create a freestanding, self-sustaining, independent office, there should be automatic systems that allow someone to continue as the head in the interim until there's a permanent advocate, can lawfully fulfill that role by being an attorney, and allows the advocate as an agency head, again, to establish internal structures and controls consistent with other agencies that stand on their own, that don't require constant thinking and reinventing the wheel and engagement with outsiders, as much as I was helped by many different stakeholders to get through the period when Ginger departed. It's not easy to do that or to have to scramble every time and figure it out. So all of these changes together are meant to tie those ideas into one notion and make it clear cut in the statute. If that makes sense, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Todd on this section? Any comments? No. Okay, well, do we want to, will someone please move to adopt this new language proposed by Todd?
I will make that. I'll make that motion. I just want to be sure that repeat Todd's request as to whether or not Senator Thatcher has any follow-up questions before I make my motion.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. This is Senator Thatcher. I do not have any other questions. I appreciate all the work that's been put in to this and appreciate all the thoughts, processes. I think there's basically some good changes here, but I was just worried that it would kind of hang things up at the legislature if we moved with new language.
Yeah. Michael, did you have something?
No, I was going to make the motion, but I'm happy for the discussion to continue.
Okay, Mark.
So I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
And the motion is to adopt this paragraph.
Yep, it's to adopt the paragraphs below the ORS Chapter 240, but above the red state archivist may furnish stuff. I'm not talking about that yet.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've gotten my motion and I've got my second. I am voting yes on this one. Emily?
Yes. Yeah, I'm voting yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
All right, we've got yeses on that. So that stays in. All right, next one. Number 4. State archivists may furnish office facilities and provide administrative support to the public records advocate. That is removed. And then it also removes if the state archivist declines, then DAS provides those services. Do we have any general questions? Senator Thatcher, did you have additional questions on this one? Or were they already answered?
No, on none of it. I'm good from now on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Todd on this portion?
I have a question. It's Emily. Sorry, it's just I don't really fully understand how the budgeting process works. So I'm taking this as a learning opportunity. If there's a fund that's separate and distinct from the general fund and the money is continuously appropriated to the public records fund, so does that mean that of the budgetary process, like a budget is decided by the legislature for that public records advocate fund, and then it just has to be filled, and it can't be taken for some other purpose later in the biennium. Like, what's so important about separating it out? And then the second question I have is, like, what are the costs of the Public Records Advisory Council?
Okay, so a couple things. I'm really just asking for folks to vote on the removal part right now.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Of furnishing office facilities. The fifth vote will be on that green portion that's highlighted, the advocate fund being established. But we can still talk about that if you'd like right now. From what I understand, the council doesn't have money that we're spending. So I can speak to that portion. If we are being allocated money as a council, we're not spending that. Adam, do you want to tackle the question about the general fund, or did you hear that question?
I did, and yeah, this is Adam again. So again, all the usual caveats about not being a budget guy, and apologies. I think we may be joined by my 7-month-old daughter who's currently teething and having a rough time.
I'm
So
sorry.
you may be hearing her on the phone too. But essentially, this is kind of relatively rote language for either a new program or a new agency that a separate and distinct fund is set up separate from the general fund. That's where the money goes into. The only other thing I'd probably like to put a caveat on is I think you made a question about, or you had a question, Emily, about, can the legislature come in and sweep those funds at a future date? They absolutely can. It's entirely possible they're going to do that over the next 6 months for a whole bunch of other state agencies and a whole bunch of different funds. But this, to me anyway, this looks like fairly standard language, creating a different fund through which money is appropriated to.
Okay, so the continuously appropriated doesn't mean it can't be reappropriated for some other more urgent purpose.
That's my understanding.
Adam, this is.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that would be a good talking point if we move forward with this language in this bill. I just for legislators, when I first read this, when we first had this discussion, I read this section not to be boilerplate, but instead to be creating a new funding stream dedicated for this office, and it was explained that that's not the case. That's a whole separate discussion. But if there's anything that might raise red flags for legislators, it might be that if they read it the same way I did. So having Adam's explanation at the ready is helpful. Like, this is just standard for any new agency.
And I'm not sure if Adam quite covered this, but my understanding is this obviously is not going to be binding on the legislature, but what it means is that the money would be in its own place, just where, DAS and other state agencies couldn't touch it. So the legislature can change its own laws, obviously, but we're not taking away their authority.
Thank you, Michael. That's a good point. Todd, did you have something else to add?
I think just 2 points. One is along the lines of if the legislature comes in and sweeps money out of the budget to address any shortfalls. Currently, the budget is under DAS, and it would be included as potentially a source of money if it's taken out of DAS. Whereas if the agency stands on its own, Public Records Advocate becomes its own agency, we would be viewed as a separate agency for purposes of sweeping. So honestly, we might actually be less shielded from those types of measures than if we are at DAS, but that's just the reality of being your own state agency. You have to go to bat for your own budget, and you have to suffer the consequences of budget changes, as all agencies do, but that is the reality of the situation. Also, this language that I have here made it through the DAS 16 amendment that was adopted with SB 106 that created the office, and then only fell in the DAS 17 amendment that became the final version of the bill. So this language is not unfamiliar or unsupported in the legislature. In fact, when the governor's office testified about the DAS 16 that included this language, Emily Matazar stated at length that all the language in the Dash 16 was agreed upon by all stakeholders, and they wholeheartedly supported it. It fell in the end, perhaps in part, and I'm only speculating because the office wasn't made clearly independent, but I think by establishing in this bill that the office is clearly independent and reintroducing this language are two ends of the same point and is more likely to pass now as a result of everything that transpired and the clearer language in this bill.
Thank you,
Okay,
Todd.
thanks. That's helpful. Can I ask about this, like the Public Records Advisory Council costs? I mean, if there is no budget for it, I mean, maybe I can think of ways to spend money, but I mean, just curious, like why it's in there.
It's in there because it was originally included, and I didn't want to be prohibited from ever being able to spend money on the council. But the reality, Emily, at this point is that up until COVID and the stay-at-home order, pretty much the majority of the money we had was taken up 50% by salaries and the other 50% by travel related to training and stuff like that. So it's not like there was a ton of extra money. And not to sound facetious or flippant, but the one expense we had during Ginger's tenure was $25 per quarter when she bought coffee and donuts for the council. So yeah, there is potentially room, especially because I'm not traveling right now and we have some cost savings due to one position being vacant for the council to explore revenue usage. But at the same time, like I said, our office, along with everyone else, might be facing some budget cuts to get through current times. So you have to consider that as well. But finally, I was working with DAS to build a budget case as to why what kind of rent would look like for the office to stand on its own, as well as contracting for services like HR, timekeeping, et cetera. And so any future budget ask that includes an increase in asking for money for things like that, the council could explore other things it would like to ask for as well. But obviously, it's always a balancing act between keeping the office's core functioning and what the council also would like to do.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any more questions for Todd or no? Okay, well, can we maybe get a motion to adopt the funding language towards the bottom, the 9AB section?
Stephanie, I think
Yes.
we're still on striking the
I know, I
language
skipped
about...
it, Michael. I was going to come back since we had a
okay.
side conversation.
I think the reason we had this conversation, though, is because the council, other members probably agree with me that it would be unwise to strike the red language if we weren't adopting something like the green language.
Okay.
But I'm very happy to vote or to move only that we add the green language. That seems like a good motion. So I will move that we adopt let me try to be more specific. The language in section 9A on line, I guess, under line 26 and above line 27.
Thank you, Michael.
Second.
Thank you for a second. So I'm going to do a roll call. I am voting yes. Emily?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yes.
Les? Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. Skipping back up, going back up to 22 to 26, striking all of that. So Todd, do you want to talk about why you think this is necessary one more time briefly?
Sure. I think it would be an anomaly for an independent office to have language such as this, and removing it puts the office in line with other agencies and standard practices, which for this purpose I think is necessary.
All right, do I have any
Again,
questions?
I'm open to any questions.
Questions for Todd, comments?
I would move the lines 22, 26 on page 2, SB 1506 be
have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, I'll do a roll call. Emily?
I vote to strike it.
Steve?
Yes.
Aye.
Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
All right, and I'm going to abstain on that one. All right, so we have voted on 5 different distinct categories, all receiving unanimous support except for the intro language, so that is noted. Mark, do you have a barking dog? Do you want to mute? Sorry. And so now we're going to be taking up the topic of what would the council like me to do as the chair in terms of pursuing a special session bill. Probably not next week if the deadline is today, but in a future summer session. Does the council want me to shop around SB 1506 as written, or does the council want me to pursue a new version that would be including all of Todd's suggestions except the introductory line?
Stephanie,
This is Mark. This is Mark. I'm wondering if we can revisit that first issue to see if we can get to unanimity. I mean, I know it may not be that critical, but a 5-4 vote seems to me that I don't know if the rest of the council feels this way, but we've been pretty much unanimous on everything else, and that seemed to be the first one. Although it is substantive, I doubt very much that we would have much trouble getting to unanimity.
Okay, so we do have some no votes. We have Emily, Steve, Rob, Tony, and Michael. Do any of you have second thoughts about a no on that?
I would, yeah, I would speak to that. I guess I would sort of take my cues to some extent from Senator Thatcher in that she is a person who had some objections. Sounds like maybe those objections were resolved through discussion. And so, I mean, this is a sample of one senator, but my concern is kind of political viability. And if we have that bit of affirmation, then I might feel comfortable voting yes.
Okay.
And this is Senator Thatcher. Can I speak to it really quickly?
Yes, please.
If I were a voting member, I absolutely like language that says it's going to be an independent office. I just wondered what the ramifications were when paired with the removal of some of the language down below. But I absolutely support that. I think it's stronger and I think it's better.
Thank you, Senator Thatcher. So Tony, Michael, Rob.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I guess I voted no because, I heard, I guess for me, I heard it might create confusion, and then that there might be an opportunity to make it the strongest possible. And then, if since we are revisiting in hindsight, seeing that how unanimous we all were, I agree with Mark, and thanks for bringing it up to be able to revisit. So yes, I'm yes, I just kind of wanted to say that, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Are you wanting to change your vote to yes? Or no?
I just need a quick minute just to make a few more thoughts. I'm really sorry.
Sure. No, it's okay. Emily, any second thoughts or?
Well, we've changed it significantly, like we've accepted everything else. I didn't, and like I said before, I do think it's stronger language, although I don't really see, I mean, I guess I'm not totally sure that there's a practical difference. And yeah, I mean, I'm with Steve on the like, what's gonna, what we already talked about, like the different weighings of things. How can we, I think we were all unanimous on we want this office to be more independent. That's been agreed upon a number of times. Question is how to get there best and frankly quickest. That could be a lot of different outcomes. So I am equally just as torn as I was previously. So if it's in the interests of being unanimous, I would change my vote.
Well, I'm not planning to change mine, so I'm not. You guys are probably not going to get to unanimity. Just for me, like I think it maybe is moderately better language, sort of stylistically, but I just don't see a functional difference, and therefore don't really think it's a good idea to go changing it. So,
Michael, can I ask you, if much else in the bill is changed, and you don't see a functional real difference, what is the what is your thinking about not changing this line?
I think there's confusion without a functional improvement. I think it is confusing to say that it has to function independently when you're considering things like the issues that the senator raised. Like, well, does that mean, like, does that prohibit you from intergovernmental agreements of the kind that Todd talked about, for example? If you're operating with another agency pursuant to an IGA, are you really functioning independently of another agency? I don't know, and I don't think ultimately that's where it would land, but the functioning language in particular just seems to me like it introduces confusion without any real benefit.
Let me ask differently, and perhaps this is directed to Todd. As a matter of fact, it is directed to Todd. Between the two, the stricken language, red, and the green language, they're functionally generally the same. Is that fair to say? The intent certainly is the same.
Yes, Mark.
Well, and Todd, I mean, I know that you would prefer the green language, but in the interest, if they're functionally the same, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. The point is the office is independent. It's spoken to in both the red and the green. I'm willing to just change my vote and say no, just to get us closer to a group that we can say that a majority of folks are there. I mean, I don't feel strongly one way or the other on this particular one because, again, as Todd points out, they're functionally the same. And so, again, sort of in my opinion, I'd like to get at least closer to unanimity. So, Stephanie, for my purposes, I'm willing to change my vote on that from yes to no, despite my stubbornness.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I've noted that. Others who voted yes are Les, Adam, and myself. I think that was all the yeses. So Les or Adam, any other thoughts? Or are you still wanting yes?
I'll go either way. I mean, again, it's the principle that I'm interested in driving ahead. So let's get that principle moving down the road.
Yeah.
I think Mark, I really appreciate what Mark said, and I think if there are those if the remainder of the yeses feel the same way, sort of on the fence, I think there's a lot to be said for saying that we spoke with consensus.
Yeah. Adam, any thoughts?
from my point of view, a strong and as clear message of independence, I think serves you well. And I think ultimately, both now and in the future, when all of us have moved on, a clear legislative record about how independent the public records advocate is, I think stands you in good stead. So I'd like to still say yes.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Emily, can I ask, I mean, is there, this is to Michael, is there alternate language that you would propose that would take out the part you're concerned about that, you know, might you know, keep the heft and the independence preserved, you know, for years to come, as Adam just spelled out? There's no need that we have to adopt just this. I mean, we could move to slightly change a word and adopt that.
Hey, that's a very good point, Emily. I think really that what I got from the senator's question was that the function, and when she asked it, it made sense to me. I think the function word is maybe the word that is confusing people. And if it said shall be separate and independent from, then I think that would probably resolve that issue.
I like that.
Yeah, that looks good to me. Todd, what do you think about that? Todd? We can't hear you.
Sorry, I was having technical. No, I'm back. I had Wi-Fi issues, so I missed what the proposed language was.
Oh, the language is the public records advocate shall be separate and independent from any other state agency. Am I summarizing that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would take the word function out of it.
I still think it could lead to questions of what does that mean. I think any version that expands upon the original version that Ledge Council came up with can lead to the same questions regardless of the language used. I'm in favor of more language anyway, because much like Adam said, I think it's a clear declaratory statement of the office's independent in statute until it's changed for any future users of the statute. So I think any language that goes beyond what Ledge Council came up with will lead to the same questions. That being said, I'm not wedded to any particular version, but rather just the notion of a strong statement. And just one more thing, because if questions do arise with the language I suggested, we could point back to the long-term care ombudsman for clarity about what that means.
Okay.
This is Tom. Todd, you repeated it, and after I wrote a note, you mentioned it. So it's already been cleared through Legislative Council, the green portion, and I like the idea. I support the idea for B, and Mark, I know you changed your vote to no, but I'd be willing to change it to yes, just because I later learned that, or was able to kind of come together that, you know, this is already good, I guess, through LC. So I just kind of wanted to toss that out there, but I agree with Steve and with Mark that it's important to have a unanimous voice if possible.
Point of clarification. So where are we on this? Is there a motion being changed? Are we changing votes? We've been a lot of back and forth here. So
yes, there has been. I think Les, where we're at is folks are kind of debating language to try to get us to a unanimous decision, because we were unanimous on everything else. So
it sounded like the B was a good option, and Todd said that for the sake of a strong message, to me that's the closest to the proposed changes that Todd has worked the longest for. So to put the whole document together. So I would propose to make the green statement, if possible, with the B replacement of function. If I heard Todd correctly saying that he didn't have an option, or he would move forward with, or at least keep living with it. Sorry, I'm stumbling and my anxiety's up.
That's okay.
If that was a motion, I'd second it.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I'm going to do a roll call, and we're voting on whether the language will be the Office of the Public Records, or no, I'm sorry. The Public Records Advocate shall be separate and independent from any other state agency. That's what we're voting on. So I am voting yes. Emily?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Tony? Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
All right, we have done it. So now, I guess my question to you kind folks is, would you like me to pursue getting this bill as we've agreed upon it now, as the version that I am, quote unquote, shopping around to legislators and sending a letter to the governor, the speaker, anyone else that Andrea tells me to communicate with? Thank you, Andrea. Do we want to vote on that? Thoughts?
I think we should have a discussion first.
Okay.
If I may.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the belief that we've improved upon what we put forward. I think that this addresses some real critical questions that Adam has raised about budgetary issues. I'd hate to have to go back and clean something up. If we have the chance to do this, and in no way am I opposed, although I have to confess I do share some of Michael's concerns or questions, I think that if we're going to go forward, we should go with the best product possible, and I would prefer to go with the new and improved.
Thank you, Mark. Any other thoughts, folks?
I would prefer to do that, but I think we should frankly wait until 2021. I just don't see, I certainly do not support trying to get it on the agenda for next week's special session. If we get wind that there's going to be another one, then I might be willing to reconsider, especially if we can be involved early. But I cannot vote in favor of trying to get this on the agenda for next week. I don't think it's realistic, and I do think actually there are costs even to making attempts at things like that when you're so far afield.
Yeah, I personally, as the person who would be doing it, am not comfortable doing that for next week, I don't think, because I believe Robbie said the deadline is today at 5 and it's already 4, so I definitely can't do that. I think, Michael, people are discussing whether they would like me to pursue a future session in the summer. Is that what I'm understanding from people?
Well, this is Mark. Remember that Senator Thatcher did mention that there may be opportunities to amend as well. I don't think necessarily that that's going to be taken well, particularly if we haven't done any pre-work with members and leadership. I sort of share some of Michael's concerns, but I'm certainly of the belief that you can never hit a foul ball unless you step into the batter's box.
Can somebody
now for a point?
Sure, Todd.
I just wanted to put this idea in everyone's head to keep in mind when thinking about whom to reach out for or whom to reach out to about this bill and to get perhaps their support of it if we are going to introduce it into a special session. In that, if we're going to couch the bill in terms of reform for open government that's tied to the police oversight bills that are pending and that type of reform, I think it's really important to reach out to the POC caucus and get their opinion about including this bill that would at least be adjacent to the reforms that they're really championing and that's driving that aspect of any special session that might occur. I don't think it's appropriate for us to kind of, intrude in that situation or offer our voices when we haven't heard theirs on this. I think it's important we listen to them and see what their opinion is before proceeding.
Thank you, Todd. That's a really good point.
This is Steve. Yeah, I think that is a really strong point, Todd. Can somebody briefly state the stated objectives again for next week's special session?
Police reform and COVID, is my understanding.
So to the degree that were we able to vet this? If people who are active on the issue of police reform were to agree that this made sense as part of that agenda, would that make others feel more comfortable?
For a later
This is
special
Todd.
session? Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I'm sorry, I was just going to answer the question for myself personally. As someone who would be charged along with Stephanie and advocating for the bill, I would feel more comfortable.
Agreed.
Is there any sense that, I mean, but in the sense is there's one shot at a police reform session this year. Any further special sessions would concern other topics, presumably?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, this is Rob. I'm not sure. Oh.
Rob, go ahead.
I'm not sure I agree with any of the presumptions being made here, but I don't know that it affects what we're really talking about, which is trying to get this into the hopper either in 2021 or in the subsequent special session. The 5 o'clock deadline that I mentioned earlier is not really a hard deadline. It's just an internal deadline for certain members of the House to get additional issues to House leadership to potentially add to what a lot of people are calling the list of 25 issues that they're currently looking at addressing in the first special session. The first 6 of those 25 have to do with police accountability, and then there's a huge tranche of additional items that have to do directly with COVID, and then there's a small handful of additional items that are kind of tangentially related, if you put it that way. So I'm in general agreement with Mark, what Mark said before. You really need to get to the batter's box and swing, but it may be a waste of effort to try to get this one swung at in the first special session, unless, for example, Senator Thatcher or Representative Power were to step up and say, "Oh, I'll go take this and try to squeeze it in here at the last moment." Barring that, I think it would take a lot of effort to try to get it even considered for next Wednesday, and I wouldn't try to redirect efforts to that. As to whether we pick a later subsequent special session, it's my impression that the next special session is going to be mostly about rebalancing the budget after Congress does whatever it does with regard to replacement revenues. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject here, but it seemed like the conversation was going really off on tangents that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
This is Les. I'll weigh in one last time on this. So this special session, as Steve has eloquently explained, does have the government accountability element as a foundational element, it seems. What about if we designate Stephanie and Todd to simply check with the leadership, with Speaker Kotek's office and Courtney's office, and just take a temperature reading? I mean, if they say, "Are you out of your mind?" then you go away. If they say, that does make sense. I mean, that way, I don't think we have to necessarily do a full court press. I think we take our cues from leadership. Give the leadership a chance to tell us no. Let's not assume that they'll tell us no. If they say no, then I think we do hold our powder till 2021, because the political atmosphere for this in the next special session, i.e. next week, is because records reform was likely to be part of the discussion. So it makes all the sense in the world that the Public Records Council be front and center as part of that conversation. So my suggestion is that we delegate to Stephanie and to Todd the authority to approach the leadership, tomorrow and get a thumbs up, thumbs down, and then go from there.
This is Steve.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Steve again. I just had a question of Rob. Those 6 items relating to police accountability, do any of those speak directly to transparency?
Yeah, I think so. One that I'm working with Nick Budnick actually on right now, LC 35. We're trying to do some tweaks to it to make it do what it needs to do. It's mostly about, however, remote meetings and trying to deal with, on a forward-going basis, how we conduct public meetings in this COVID environment and making sure that media has access and the public is aware of what we're up to. So there is that bill kind of circulating. So
there's also Rob, there's also a bill, I believe, I don't know the number, that has been floated anyway that would make police discipline records treated more like teacher discipline records, but still frankly is not that transparent. But
yeah, it's kind of one of the 6, the first 6 of the 25 involves a database, a state database of police disciplinary action. Yeah, that's just one of the concepts being floated out there as well. From my part, I have no problem with Stephanie or Todd or whomever just contacting leadership to see if there's any chance of this being in the mix for even the first special session. I just, if they say no, I won't be terribly surprised, because I think they're trying to struggle with how do we get all this stuff done next Wednesday.
I would say that it seems to me Todd's point about contacting the POC caucus even before that probably makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Tony, if I can just say something real quick, I heard that I didn't know that this. I'm sorry for the newbiness of it, but that the special session that is coming is 2 days, and I also heard that that there's it's seeing that there's so many different issues already kind of in line, and if there's a way to add it onto an existing bill, I wouldn't be opposed. But I think if there's a possibility for future sessions and the obvious, I think it's definitely we should reach out to the leaders that are proposing the reform bills, like Todd suggested. I think is a very important move to do, and definitely not. I don't know if it's possible to fully get that done before this first special session. So I think I support, if possible, I support what Les said earlier about just making the ask and letting leadership respond about when they see it as the best, and we'll move from there. I hope that I feel like I probably just made it cloudier, but I just want to say that I support the idea of making sure that this is a priority for if it is for the public.
Okay, so we are a little bit over our time. I want to be respectful of people's calendars. Senator Thatcher said thank you, and she will, let me read what she said. She will support whatever we all decide. She has another meeting. So in the interest of time, I do want to kind of try to move forward with at least a consensus on the version that I am shopping. I want to make sure that I understand that what I think I understand is that you all would like me to move forward with trying to promote this new version that we've approved today, and not the previous SB 1506 version. Am I hearing that correctly?
From my perspective, yeah.
Correct. From my perspective, we
Do
still
I
have
need to
to
vote on
determine.
that? Do we need to vote on that?
Why doesn't anyone disagree. Speak up.
What was the question?
I think, yeah, what I'd like to have people do is vote on whether to have me promote this new version that we've agreed upon today instead of the previous session's SB 1506.
Also be helpful motion.
Thank you. So I'm going to go through and vote. Emily?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Adam?
I'm going to vote yes on the newness of the measure, but are we taking a second vote about whether or not you're going to approach legislative
Yes.
leadership?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
That's what I'm about to do now.
Then I'm a yes.
Thank you. All right. So if
I'd like.
Oh,
okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, go ahead, Mark.
I'm prepared to make a second motion. That motion would entail Stephanie and Todd to approach the People of Color Caucus to get their temperature on whether or not they would see this new version that we just unanimously adopted as a viable, whether it's a viable complement to the reforms they're attempting. And if they say yes, that they then approach leadership to see whether or not this is something that could be considered in the upcoming legislative special session. And I can't believe I'm saying this despite the fact that I agree with Michael.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Emily?
I have a question before I vote. Sorry, I know the time is over, and I'm also sensitive to everyone's time. But I just want to get a better understanding of what your you imagine like your approach would be. Like, is it going to be, you know, we don't see this as, we don't want this to compete with other very important things, but we do see it. I mean, some of the things I said as to why I see it connected, are those going to be in your message, or is it just going to be like, hey, we got together and we fixed some stuff. You guys already approved this. Can you put it on your list? I mean, like, what's, you know, what's the letter going to say?
I'm not going to say that, Emily. I'm not going to.
I know, I'm just
like
being
that.
casual.
But what my first step will be is to confab with Todd and Andrea. Andrea is our legislative director here at Secretary of State's office. She was instrumental in helping me navigate the system before. So that will be my first step. And she will, you know, she has the correct contact information for the appropriate people at the appropriate levels. This is what she does for a living. So I will work with her to create a message that is, you know, if this is the will of the council, then I will do my darndest to navigate it in the most appropriate way that I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just think, you know, I think there's some different feelings here on how appropriate it is. I mean, frankly, this didn't get through the last session. I'm not sure it's going to get through 2021. I'm very much in favor of trying to make this happen. So I appreciate Les's point that I mean, we're you know, you can't, yeah, you don't want to hit a foul ball, but you know, you definitely can't hit a home run if you don't swing, right? So I don't think there's a guarantee it's a whole new batch of lawmakers potentially. Anyway, so I'm very much appreciative of the opportunity to make a case for this right now. But you know, I mean, I think I've spelled out the sensitivities. So I think you've got some mixed messages from the council. So yeah, I think it will be something worth spending some time crafting. And if that's, you know, I mean, I have great faith in you and Todd, and if that's the plan, then I would vote to yes, to ask you to go ahead and do as the motion just outlined that Mark said.
Okay, Steve?
Are we? Oh, okay. Sorry.
We're still voting, Michael, sorry.
No, it's good.
Steve?
I will vote yes. I'd also like to say I think it might be helpful to talk about, in addition to you carrying that message forward, whether there's a possibility of the council making a public statement or just sort of an endorsement of this concept once the vetting has been completed and we know that there is support among the broader community.
Okay, Les?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Michael?
Well, I don't think there is really any urgency in this bill, and I'm frankly kind of shocked that so many members of this council think it warrants getting put onto the agenda with the issues of COVID response and police reform. I am absolutely going to vote no.
Thank you. Adam?
I'm going to abstain. If yes, let me know if you have questions about that.
No problem at all. I'm also abstaining. All right, so it looks like we do have the majority of yes votes, so that means I have my work cut out for me. I will take it seriously. I will speak on behalf of the council. I will listen to this meeting over and over if I need to clarify my thinking. But I will first and foremost work together with Andrea to figure out the appropriate process, and you know, knowing that if it doesn't happen in a special session, then we'll pursue it in 2021 with all those deadlines and everything. So does anyone else have anything else to discuss today? If not, I will adjourn the meeting.
Emily, I just want to say thank you to Michael for your frankness, and I also just want to make it clear, I don't think it's more important. I just think it's important. So just wanted to make that clear.
Did someone else have something?
Yeah, Stephanie, I just wanted to ask.
I thought Tony had something for the end of the agenda as well, Stephanie.
I think I'll let him speak for himself. Yeah. But Steve, did you have something too in there? Did I see you?
Well, I'll also yield to Tony. I think you had something to say.
Okay, Tony?
I was just going to bring up, because I brought it up at the beginning of the session. We discussed a lot of what was on my mind during the discussion, so I'm happy to. Yeah, so I'll back away from that. But I do want to say I raise my voice a lot, and sometimes in these discussions, and it's a lot from just my learning of and trying to deal with mental health. So like I just want to appreciate everyone's discussions, and including and I apologize to Michael for a reaction I think that I felt was more aggressive than needed to be when you said the idea was crazy. I just kind of had my own feelings. And I also want to say this morning I almost posted, you know, I have my own personal feelings about what's going on, and as a privileged person to be sitting on this council, I do kind of feel that you know, as this great opportunity that I have to try to in my way, in my small contribution as somehow a leader, would like to you know, advocate it. So Stephanie and Todd, if there's any assistance that you need in asking leaders that are proposing measures these next couple days or in these potential sessions, I'm happy to help out. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. I will look for a time. Do folks want to meet in July and get an update from me?
My question was going to be, Stephanie, whether there's a way that you could provide feedback once you've spoken to the People of Color Caucus.
Sure. Yep. I can push messages out and let folks know how it's going. Sure.
And the last thing I'll say, I guess, on that is, Michael, I totally take your point, and I'm sorry that well, I know that you feel strongly about this outcome, and I see why. I think I feel I feel much better about the fact that we are now that we are going to do some listening before we start advocating. And to be honest, I hadn't really thoroughly thought that through at the beginning of this discussion, and that's a strike against me. But I do feel like if there's consensus beyond our small group that this is something valuable in the cause, that that we should take that to heart and should not feel badly about advocating for it.
All right, thank you, Steve. Does anyone else have any closing thoughts today before we adjourn? No? All right, I
I move
cannot.
to adjourn.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Second.
Todd, can I just say, Tony, thank you for your words. I know that's not always easy to do, and I appreciate you speaking up.
Thank you, Todd.
Sure.
Can I get a second to adjourn today?
I'll second it, and also I do want to say thank you. This was really one of the most interesting and fun PrAC meetings so far. So thank you. And a second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Seeing none, we are adjourning for today. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be updating you soon.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.